Just very briefly, and thanks to our guests for their answers. And again, I'm sure you probably said this earlier, but where are you at the moment in terms of the development of the legislation? Are there drafts available of sort of where you're at, or and what sort of criteria will form the basis for assessing areas to be designated, and what sort of process, like how far along the road are you, and how much of the road that you've traveled so far, or that you've kind of set out some kind of framework for, can we see at this point?
Right, it's a good question. I was actually going to invite Mr. Cronin just to give us a synopsis on that, but it's the question I was going to ask. So I'll leave that to Mr. Cronin. If you want to give us just a brief overview, a synopsis of that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Deputy. I suppose before I go any further, because I get the sense we're coming close to the end of this, I'd just like to thank my colleague, Dr. O'Kyla, who is the brains in this operation. Okay, so while he hasn't been speaking here today, he's the one who provides me with nearly most of the useful things that come out of my mouth, and the rest I can't. It's all my own fault apart from that. So just on that particular issue, in the opening comments I made, I just described where we are at the moment. We've started development of the general scheme on the new legislation, and there's a list of things that we're going to link that to, so requirements of certain European directives, the EU Green Deal, and really what's really important for us is the findings of the expert advisory report and the views of the stakeholders. So we're at that stage now. We think we'll have that delivered by Q3 of 2022, and we think that with the help of everybody who's going to support the process, we can have the legislation developed by 2023. There are other legislative models similar to our legal code that help us to understand what needs to go into it, and we understand ourselves around the different processes. So the identification of the things that need protection, the criteria for qualification, as the Deputy highlights, the consultation, and I think more importantly, the participation process. I would be strongly in favour of a stewardship model as opposed to just a box-ticking consultation. I think that's really the next stage in our development of engagement, where we need to go to. So that piece is a big challenge, but I think it's important to face up to it. That has to be designed. The designation itself, the actual creation of the designation, the management plan piece has to be put in place, how we do that and how we have the relationship with other legal requirements and obligations, and then how all of that is represented, so where it goes to. Do we just see it on a map? How do we understand it? So the communication and education piece. And then when you get to the end of that journey for a marine protected area, the journey back to the start to check that everything is working, the monitoring program, to adapt again and to update and improve and to change if necessary. So I think one of the points I made in my earlier comments was that once we set up the legislation, we are really looking here at a process that will go on and on and on. We look now at 30%. I believe we'll be looking at different numbers at some point after the end of this decade, but I think we really are looking at a part of governance reform here, and it's putting protection as part of the overall plan to develop our marine environment and giving it a solid independent footing, so we're confident that we're making good decisions, so that we can provide assurance that the environment is improving and it's protected where necessary. And also that when we carry out human activities, we can say with confidence that they are sustainable, okay, as opposed to just putting the word sustainable in front of everything else we do. We must really have meat on that frame. So that's where we are. That's our journey over the next year to year and a half. We also, and I said this earlier in earlier evidence as well, we have committed to create a kind of parallel set of timelines across all the different processes. So the environment processes, the Birds and Habitats Directive, the spatial planning processes, hopefully to incorporate other processes like offshore renewable development plans and things like that. But so we can create an overall set of timelines, and then we can understand whether the risks around mismatch in the potential mismatch in the delivery of different things is real. Okay, so whether it's real or not. Also then to decide whether the spatial impact, so where we want to put activities, is really where we want to put, where we think we're going to put the MPAs, so where we think the habitats are and the species are. So we can have that mapped out, and then from that mapping exercise, we can then make decisions about how real the risk is and what actions to take to mitigate that risk. So this precautionary approach that we've discussed, I think, in the evidence and in the questions we had here. So that's the plan, okay? So the next thing is to take off the suit and start doing it. And again, I think my last comment is, if I can just, Chair, if you can indulge me, my last comment was, while we may be the responsible people to do this, this is something that will happen for all of society. So for all the marine stakeholders, for all the people, okay, and for the representatives, so for the deputies, for the senators, this is something that we're just, we will be the ones stewarding it, but it's really important that we all do this together. And that's clear from the feedback we've had, and it's the one unifying thing. If I could summarize the 2,400 public consultation responses we received, everybody wants them and they all want to be involved.